The ground shook under Jake Martinez's boots as another explosion rocked the city. Dust and debris rained down from the broken buildings around him. He pressed his back against a concrete wall and checked his rifle. Only half a magazine left. "Sarge, we can't stay here much longer," Danny Cole whispered from behind a pile of rubble. The young private's hands were shaking as he held his weapon. Danny was only 19 years old, and this was his first real battle. Jake looked around at what was left of New Haven City. 3 months ago, this place had been home to 50,000 people. Now it was just broken concrete and twisted metal. The Catherian forces had hit the planet hard and fast. Their reptilian soldiers were pushing deeper into human territory every day. "I know, kid," Jake said quietly, "but we hold this position until Captain Rodriguez gives us new orders." Another blast shook the building they were hiding behind. Jake could hear the heavy footsteps of Catherian soldiers getting closer. Their metal boots made a distinct sound on the broken pavement. He had been fighting these alien invaders for 6 years now. He knew their sounds, their tactics, their weaknesses. "Movement to the east," called out Private Martinez from his sniper position on the second floor of a nearby building. He was no relation to Jake, despite sharing the same last name. "Looks like a full squad heading our way." Jake cursed under his breath. They were outnumbered and running low on ammunition. The Catherians were known for their brutal efficiency. They took no prisoners and showed no mercy. Their scales could stop most small arms fire, and their natural strength was twice that of a human. "We need to find better cover," Jake decided. He pointed to a large building across the street. "That apartment complex looks mostly intact. We can set up defensive positions there." Danny nodded and prepared to move. Jake checked his gear one more time. 6 years of war had taught him to be careful with every bullet, every grenade, every piece of equipment. On his belt, he carried a combat knife, 2 frag grenades, and a med kit. In his backpack were rations for 3 days and extra ammunition. They moved quickly across the street, using the smoke from burning vehicles as cover. Jake went first, his experienced eyes scanning for threats. Danny followed close behind, trying to match his sergeant's careful movements. The apartment building was dark inside. Most of the windows were broken, and furniture was scattered everywhere. Jake signaled for Danny to check the upper floors while he searched the ground level. They needed to make sure the building was empty before setting up their position. Jake moved through the first floor carefully. His boots crunched on broken glass. The smell of smoke and dust filled his nostrils. He had cleared hundreds of buildings like this one. Most were empty, abandoned when the civilians evacuated. Sometimes they contained enemy soldiers or booby traps. He was checking the last room on the first floor when he heard something that made him freeze. It was a soft crying sound, barely audible over the distant sounds of battle. Jake followed the sound to a door that led to the basement. The crying was coming from downstairs. Jake descended the concrete steps slowly, his rifle ready. The basement was almost completely dark. He switched on the flashlight attached to his weapon. The beam revealed storage boxes, old furniture, and pipes running along the ceiling. In the far corner, huddled behind a broken washing machine, was a small figure. Jake's heart stopped. It was a child, but not a human child. The small being had pale blue skin and large dark eyes that reflected his flashlight beam. It was clearly terrified, pressing itself against the wall as if trying to disappear. The child was not a Catherian. Jake had seen enough of those reptilian monsters to know the difference. This child looked more like the peaceful Valerian species he had heard about in intelligence briefings. The Valerians were known for their healing abilities and diplomatic nature. They were not part of this war. "Hey there," Jake said softly, lowering his weapon. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The child looked up at him with those large eyes. Jake could see that she was injured. There was dark blood on her arm, and her breathing was shallow. She appeared to be about 8 years old, though it was hard to tell with alien physiology. Jake knelt down slowly, making himself less threatening. "My name is Jake. What's your name?" The child said something in a language he didn't understand. Her voice was soft and musical, even through her fear and pain. "Lyra," she said finally in accented English. "My name is Lyra." Jake smiled. "That's a pretty name, Lyra. Are you hurt?" She nodded and showed him her injured arm. Jake could see it. Was a deep cut? Probably from flying debris. She needed medical attention soon. "Sarge." Danny's voice called from upstairs. "Company's coming. Looks like 2 squads this time." Jake's mind raced. They were about to be in a firefight, and now he had an injured alien child to protect. His training told him to stick to the mission. His orders were to hold this position and gather intelligence on enemy movements. But his conscience told him something different. "Lyra, I need to get you out of here," Jake said firmly. "There are bad soldiers coming, and this place isn't safe." The child seemed to understand. She tried to stand, but winced in pain from her injury. Jake gently lifted her up, surprised by how light she was. She weighed no more than a human child of the same size. "Danny," Jake called as he climbed the stairs. "Change of plans. We're moving out." "What?" Danny appeared at the top of the stairs. His eyes went wide when he saw the alien child in Jake's arms. "Sarge, what is that?" "A kid who needs our help," Jake said simply. "Grab the med kit and cover our 6. We're getting out of here." Danny looked confused, but followed orders. He had learned to trust his sergeant's judgment. Jake had kept their squad alive through dozens of battles. The sound of Catherian voices grew louder outside. Jake could hear them communicating in their harsh, clicking language. They were surrounding. The building. Jake carried Lyra to a back window that faced an alley. He carefully climbed through, making sure not to hurt the child further. Danny followed, scanning the area for threats. "This way," Jake whispered, heading toward the old subway entrance he had spotted earlier. "The tunnels will give us cover." They moved quickly through the alley, staying low and quiet. Lyra wrapped her thin arms around Jake's neck, trusting this human soldier who had found her in the darkness. Behind them, the apartment building exploded in gunfire as the Catherian forces realized their targets had escaped. Jake could hear them, shouting orders and spreading out to search the area. The subway entrance was partially collapsed, but there was enough room to squeeze through. Jake went first, still carrying Lyra, while Danny provided rear security. The tunnel was dark and filled with debris, but it offered protection from the enemy above. "Where are we going, Sarge?" Danny asked as they moved through the underground. Passage. Jake was thinking fast. They needed to get to the human evacuation point, but first he had to figure out how to help this child. She was clearly not a refugee. Her clothes looked too fine, almost ceremonial. She might be someone important. "The extraction point is 2 miles north," Jake said. "But first we need to patch up our friend here." He found a small alcove in the tunnel and set Lyra down gently. Using his flashlight, he examined her wound more carefully. It was deep but clean. Jake opened his med kit and began cleaning the injury. "This might hurt a little," he warned her. Lyra nodded bravely and didn't make a sound as Jake treated her wound. He applied antiseptic and bandages, working as gently as possible. The child watched him with curious eyes, as if she had never seen a human up close before. "You're very brave," Jake told her as he finished the bandaging. "Braver than some soldiers." "I know." Lyra smiled for the first time since he found her. It was a beautiful smile that made Jake think of his little sister back on Earth. The sound of explosions echoed through the tunnel. The battle above was getting worse. Jake knew they had to keep moving. "Can you walk?" he asked Lyra. She nodded and stood up carefully. Jake took her small hand in his, and they continued through the tunnel, with Danny watching their backs dot as they walked through the darkness. Jake began to realize that this rescue might be more important than he could imagine. But right now, all that mattered was getting one scared little girl to safety. The tunnel stretched ahead of them, leading toward an uncertain future that would change everything. Jake carried Lyra through the dark tunnels for what felt like hours. The little alien girl had grown quiet, her head resting against his shoulder. Danny walked behind them, constantly checking for any signs of pursuit. The sounds of battle had faded to distant rumbles, but they all knew the danger was far from over. How much further to the extraction point? Danny whispered, his voice echoing softly in the tunnel. Jake checked his compass and map. "About half a mile. We should hit the old metro station soon, then it's a straight shot to the evacuation zone." They emerged from the tunnels into what had once been Central Metro Station. The platform was cracked and covered in dust, but the structure was still solid. Jake set Lyra down gently on a bench and knelt beside her. "How are you feeling?" he asked, checking her bandages. "Better," Lyra said in her soft voice. "You are very kind, Jake. My mother told me that humans could be kind, but I did not believe her until now." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Your mother? Who is your mother, Lyra?" The child looked at him with those large, dark eyes. "Queen Zareth of the Valerian Commonwealth. I am Princess Lyra." Danny nearly dropped his rifle. "Princess? Sarge, did she just say she's a princess?" Jake stared at the small alien girl. He had rescued the daughter of an alien queen. This changed everything. If something happened to her while she was under his protection, it could start a war between humans and Valerians. But if he got her home safely, it might create an alliance. "Lyra, what were you doing on this planet?" Jake asked carefully. "Mother sent me with Ambassador Kelvin to meet with your leaders. We wanted to talk about peace, but the bad soldiers attacked our ship. Ambassador Kelvin told me to hide in the city while he tried to fix our communications." Jake's mind raced. A diplomatic mission. The Valerians had been trying to make contact with humanity, and the Catherians had attacked them. This was bigger than just one child's rescue. "We need to get her to command immediately," Danny said, understanding the situation. They made their way through the ruined city toward the human evacuation point. Jake carried Lyra again when she grew tired, telling her stories about Earth to keep her calm. He told her about blue skies and green grass, about dogs and cats, about ice cream and playgrounds. She listened with wonder, asking questions about things she had never seen. The evacuation zone was a fortified area near the old spaceport. Human soldiers had set up defensive positions and landing pads for transport ships. As Jake and Danny approached with their unusual cargo, sentries immediately raised their weapons. "Halt! Identify yourselves," called out Sergeant Pete Miller, a man Jake had known for 3 years. "Sergeant Jake Martinez, 3rd Marine Division," Jake replied. "I have a wounded civilian who needs immediate medical attention and transport to command." Pete looked at the alien child, and his eyes widened. "Is that what I think it is?" "Princess Lyra of the Valerian Commonwealth," Jake said formally. "She was caught in the crossfire and needs our protection." Within minutes, they were surrounded by officers and medics. Commander Lisa Harper, a tough woman in her 40s, pushed through the crowd. She had been Jake's commanding officer for 2 years and trusted his judgment completely. "Martinez, what exactly happened out there?" she demanded. Jake quickly explained the rescue, the tunnel escape, and Lyra's true identity. Commander Harper listened carefully, her expression growing more serious with each detail. "This is way above my pay grade," she said finally. "I'm calling this into Fleet Command immediately. Medical team, take care of the child. Martinez, you stay with her. She seems to trust you." The medics were gentle with Lyra, but she stayed close to Jake throughout the examination. She had learned to trust him during their escape, and he was the only familiar face in a sea of strangers. Ambassador. Kevin Brooks arrived 2 hours later on a fast transport. He was a tall, thin man with gray hair and tired eyes. Jake had never met him, but everyone knew he was Earth's top diplomat for alien affairs. "Princess Lyra," Brooks said formally, kneeling down to her level. "I am Ambassador Brooks. I represent the human government. We are very sorry about what happened to your ship." Lyra looked at Jake, who nodded encouragingly. "Ambassador Brooks is a good man, like Commander Harper. They want to help you get home." "Thank you," Lyra said politely. "My mother will be worried. She will come looking for me." Brooks and Harper exchanged glances. "How will she know where to find you?" Brooks asked. "All Valerian royalty have emergency beacons," Lyra explained, touching a small pendant around her neck. "Mother can track me anywhere in the galaxy." As if summoned by her words, the sky above them began to darken, not with clouds, but with the shadow of massive ships. The human soldiers at the evacuation point looked up in alarm as alien vessels appeared in the atmosphere. "Fleet Command, this is Evacuation Point 7. Commander Harper spoke rapidly into her radio. "We have unknown alien vessels approaching our position. Request immediate backup." The response crackled through the radio. "All units, stand down. Repeat, stand down. These are Valerian ships. Do not engage." The largest ship was magnificent. It looked like it was grown rather than built, with flowing curves and surfaces that seemed to pulse with inner light. It was 10 times bigger than any human warship, and it moved with impossible grace for something so large. "That's Mother's ship," Lyra said happily. "The Harmony's Edge. She came for me." The ship landed softly in a clearing near the evacuation point, its engines making no sound at all. A ramp extended from its side, and figures began to emerge. They were tall and elegant, with the same pale blue skin as Lyra, but clearly adult. They moved with dignity and purpose. Out at the center of the group walked a woman who could only be Queen Zareth. She was tall and beautiful, with long silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. She wore robes that shifted color like the aurora, and there was an aura of power around her that made everyone step back. But when she saw Lyra, all her royal dignity disappeared. She ran to her daughter with tears in her eyes. "Lyra, my precious child." Queen Zareth swept her daughter into her arms, speaking rapidly in the musical Valerian language. Lyra responded in the same language, pointing at Jake as she spoke. The Queen's eyes turned to him, and Jake felt as if she was looking directly into his soul. "You are Jake Martinez," Queen Zareth said in perfect English, "the one who saved my daughter." Jake straightened to attention. "Yes, Your Majesty." "I was just doing my duty." Queen Zareth approached him slowly. She was much taller than him, probably 7 feet, but her presence was gentle rather than intimidating. "Lyra has told me what you did, how you found her in the darkness, how you carried her to safety, how you told her stories to keep her brave. Any soldier would have done the same," Jake said, though he wasn't sure that was true. "No," the Queen said firmly, "not any soldier. You had orders to hold your position. You had a mission to complete. But you chose to save one frightened child instead. That choice shows the true nature of your heart." Commander Harper stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we need to discuss the diplomatic situation. The attack on your ship, the rescue of your daughter, the current state of the war." Queen Zareth nodded. "Yes, We have much to discuss. But first, I must understand exactly what happened. In my culture, we have a way of sharing memories directly. With your permission, Sergeant Martinez, I would like to experience your memories of the rescue. Jake looked uncertain. I don't know what that means, Your Majesty. I will touch your mind gently and see what you saw, feel what you felt. It will not harm you, but it will show me the truth of your actions. Jake glanced at Commander Harper, who nodded. It's your choice, Martinez. Jake thought about it for a moment, then nodded. If it will help, yes. Queen Zareth placed her hand gently on Jake's forehead. Her touch was warm and electric. Jake felt a strange sensation, as if someone was looking through his memories like pages in a book. He could sense her experiencing his fear during the battle, his shock at finding Lyra, his determination to protect her despite the danger. When she removed her hand, there were tears in her eyes. I have seen your heart, Jake Martinez. You risked everything for a child you had never met, of a species you barely knew. You showed compassion when others would have shown only duty. She turned to address the assembled humans. Your species has shown great kindness to my family. But I must tell you something important. The Cytherian Empire is planning a massive attack that will destroy both our peoples. They see our potential alliance as a threat to their expansion. Ambassador Brooks stepped forward. What kind of attack? They have been building a fleet in the outer systems. Within 2 months, they will have enough ships to overwhelm both human and Valerian defenses. Separately, we will fall. Together, we might survive. Commander Harper crossed her arms. You're proposing an alliance. I am proposing more than that, Queen Zareth said, her gaze returning to Jake. I am proposing a bond between our species that has never existed before. But that is a conversation for tomorrow. Tonight, I wish to thank the man who saved my daughter's life. She gestured to her attendants, who brought forward a small box made of the same living material as their ship. This is a small token of my gratitude, Sergeant Martinez. But tomorrow, I will offer you something much greater, something that will change your life forever. Jake slept poorly that night. The small gift box from Queen Zareth sat on the table beside his bunk, glowing softly with its own inner light. He had opened it earlier to find a crystal pendant that seemed to hold tiny stars inside it. Commander. Harper had explained that it was probably some kind of Valerian technology, but no one was sure what it did. The next morning, Jake was summoned to the command center. Ambassador Brooks, Commander Harper, and several other high-ranking officers were gathered around a holographic display showing the positions of various fleets throughout the sector. Martinez, we've been in communication with Queen Zareth all night, Commander Harper said. The intelligence she's provided about Cytherian fleet movements is incredible. They really are planning something massive. Ambassador Brooks nodded grimly. According to Valerian scouts, the Cytherians have assembled over 300 warships in the Outer Rim. That's enough firepower to glass every human colony and destroy the Valerian homeworld. Jake studied the display. Red dots representing Cytherian ships formed a massive cloud at the edge of the system. When will they attack? 6 weeks, Commander Harper replied. Maybe less. The Queen has offered to combine our fleets, but our military leaders back on Earth are hesitant. Too many bad experiences with alien alliances. The Cytherian betrayal 3 years ago made everyone paranoid, Brooks added. They pretended to want peace and attacked our research stations without warning. A lot of good people died. Jake understood their caution, but he had seen Queen Zareth's genuine grief and relief when she found her daughter. The Valerians aren't the Cytherians, sir. Queen Zareth was telling the truth about everything. That's what we're hoping, Brooks sighed. Which brings us to why you're here. The Queen has requested a formal ceremony this afternoon aboard her ship. She wants to present you with some kind of reward for saving Princess Lyra. Commander Harper crossed her arms. Martinez, I'm going to be honest with you. We don't know what to expect. Valerian customs are still largely unknown to us. But the Queen specifically asked for you to attend, and given the diplomatic situation, we can't refuse. 2 hours later, Jake found himself aboard the Harmony's Edge. The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls seemed to be alive, pulsing, gently with soft light. The floors felt warm under his feet, and the air had a sweet, clean smell like flowers after Rain. Princess Lyra met him at the entrance, looking much better than she had the day before. Her arm was completely healed, which amazed Jake. Valerian. Medical technology was apparently far more advanced than human medicine. Jake, she said happily, running to hug him. Mother is so excited to see you again. She has been preparing something very special. Lyra led him through corridors that curved and flowed like natural caves. Other Valerians they passed bowed respectfully. To Jake, which made him uncomfortable. He was just a sergeant, not some kind of hero. They entered a large chamber that looked like a garden inside a spaceship. Trees grew from the floor, their branches reaching toward a ceiling that showed the stars outside. In the center of the room was a pool of water that reflected the starlight like a mirror. Queen Zareth stood beside the pool, wearing robes that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. Other Valerian nobles surrounded her, all watching Jake with curious eyes. Ambassador Brooks and Commander Harper were there too, looking as overwhelmed as Jake felt. Welcome, Jake Martinez, Queen Zareth said formally. Today we gather to honor the courage and kindness you showed my daughter. But more than that, we gather to discuss the future of our two peoples. She gestured for Jake to approach. In the short time since our first meeting, I have learned much about your species. Humans are warriors, yes, but you are also protectors. You fight not for conquest, but to defend those who cannot defend themselves. Jake felt nervous standing before so many important people. Your Majesty, I just did what I thought was right. Exactly, the Queen smiled. And that is why I'm about to make you an offer that has never been made to any member of another species in all of Valerian history. She raised her hands, and the pool in the center of the room began to glow. Images appeared in the water, showing scenes of human and Valerian ships fighting together against Cytherian forces. The coming war will determine whether our peoples survive or perish, Queen Zareth continued. Separate, we are strong. Together, we could be unstoppable. But such an alliance requires more than just military cooperation. It requires understanding, trust, and communication at the deepest level. The images in the pool changed, showing Jake in what looked like a Valerian uniform, standing between groups of humans and Valerians. I am offering you the chance to become the first bridge-bearer in Valerian history. Through an ancient ritual, called the Bond of Eternal Kinship, you would become something new. Part human, part Valerian. A living link between our species. Jake stared at the images. I don't understand, Your Majesty. What does that mean exactly? Queen Zareth waved her hand, and the pool showed more detailed images. Jake saw himself with slightly glowing eyes, moving faster than any human should be able to move, surviving in environments that would kill normal people. The bond would change you in 3 fundamental ways, the Queen explained. First, your lifespan would be extended to match ours. Instead of living for perhaps 80 years, you could live for 500 or more. Second, your body would be enhanced with our healing abilities. Disease, injury, even aging would affect you differently. You would become nearly immortal. Jake felt his heart racing. And the third change? You would gain access to our collective consciousness. The ability to communicate telepathically with any Valerian, anywhere in the galaxy. You would become our permanent ambassador, able to coordinate military operations, diplomatic missions, and cultural exchanges with perfect understanding of both species. The room fell silent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat. Commander Harper looked stunned, while Ambassador Brooks was frantically taking notes. "The catch," Queen Zareth continued softly, "is that this change cannot be undone. Once you accept the bond, you can never return to being fully human. You would exist between worlds, belonging completely to neither, but serving both." Princess Lyra stepped forward. "Jake, I made you something." She held out a piece of paper with a drawing on it. It showed a figure standing on a bridge between two planets, with people from both worlds reaching toward him. "This is what you could become, a bridge between the stars." Jake looked at the drawing, then at the Queen. "Why me? Why not a diplomat, or a general, or someone more important?" "Because," Queen Zareth said, "when you found my daughter in that basement, you had a choice. You could have followed your orders and left her there. You could have called for backup and waited for someone else to handle the situation. Instead, you risked your life for a child you had never met." She stepped closer to him. "The bond can only be given to someone with a pure heart. Someone who acts from love rather than duty, from compassion rather than orders. In all my years, I have met very few beings with such a heart. You are one of them." Commander Harper stepped forward. "Your Majesty, this is a lot to ask. Sergeant Martinez needs time to consider this decision." "Of course," the Queen agreed. "But time is something we do not have much of. The Catherian fleet grows stronger every day. If Jake accepts the bond, we could begin integrating our forces immediately. If he refuses, we will still fight together, but our coordination will be limited." Jake felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Everyone was looking at him expectantly. The fate of two entire species might depend on his choice. "What would happen to my friends?" "My squad?" Jake asked. "They would become part of the integrated forces," Queen Zareth replied. "You would still serve alongside them, but as their liaison to the Valerian fleet. You would help them understand our technology and tactics, while helping us understand human adaptability and courage." Danny Cole, who had been quietly standing near the entrance, stepped forward. "Sarge, whatever you decide, we'll support you. You saved that little girl when no one else would have. If anyone deserves this chance, it's you." Jake looked around the room at all the faces watching him. Human and Valerian, young and old, all waiting for his answer. He thought about the war, about all the people who would die if the Catherians won. He thought about Princess Lyra, who had trusted him completely. He thought about the bridge in her drawing. "I need some time to think," Jake said finally. "This is the biggest decision of my life." Queen Zareth nodded. "You have until tomorrow at sunset. But Jake, remember this. Sometimes the greatest service requires the greatest sacrifice. And sometimes what seems like a sacrifice is actually a gift." As Jake left the ceremony chamber, Princess Lyra caught up with him. "Jake, are you scared?" Jake knelt down to her level. "Yes, Lyra, I'm very scared." "That's okay," she said seriously. "Mother says that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared." Jake smiled at her wisdom. "Your mother is very smart." "She likes you," Lyra said. "She says you have a good soul." "And I think so too." That night, Jake sat on the observation deck of the human command ship, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Catherian fleet was preparing to destroy everything he cared about. Jake spent the morning walking through the human camp, talking to soldiers, and thinking about his decision. Every person he met had an opinion about Queen Zareth's offer. Some thought he was crazy to even consider it. Others believed it was humanity's best chance for survival. "You're really thinking about becoming one of them?" asked Corporal Steve Williams, A man Jake had served with for 2 years. What if they're lying? What if this bond thing is just a way to control you? Jake had thought about that possibility. Steve, I touched Queen Zareth's mind yesterday. I felt her emotions when she saw her daughter. That kind of love can't be faked. But you'd stop being human, Steve argued. You'd live for hundreds of years, while the rest of us grow old and die. You'd become something alien. Before Jake could respond, Danny Cole joined the conversation. Maybe that's exactly what we need, Danny said. Someone who can understand both sides. Someone who can help us work together instead of fighting alone. The debate continued as more soldiers gathered around. Jake listened to their concerns and fears, understanding that his choice would affect all of them. If he accepted the bond, he would no longer be just another sergeant. He would become something new, something unprecedented. At noon, a transport ship arrived from Earth carrying General Robert Hayes, the highest-ranking military officer in human space. Jake had never met the general, but everyone knew his reputation. Hayes was a tough, practical man who had fought in every major conflict for the past 20 years. Jake was summoned to the command center where General Hayes, Ambassador Brooks, Commander Harper, and several other officers were studying intelligence reports about the Catherian fleet. Sergeant Martinez, General Hayes said without looking up from his reports, I've been briefed on your situation. This alien queen wants to turn you into some kind of hybrid creature. Sir, that's a very simplified way of putting it, Jake replied. Carefully, General Hayes finally looked at him. Son, I've been fighting aliens for longer than you've been alive. The Catherians promised us friendship too, right before they killed 3,000 of our people. How do we know these Valerians won't do the same thing? Jake thought about Princess Lyra's drawings, about Queen Zareth's tears when she found her daughter. General, with respect, the Valerians aren't the Catherians. They came here on a diplomatic mission. They were trying to help us when the Catherians attacked them. Maybe, Hayes said. But this bond ritual you're considering worries me. What? If it changes more than just your body? What if it changes your loyalty? What if you start thinking like them instead of like us? Ambassador Brooks stepped forward. General, we've had our scientists analyze what little we know about Valerian telepathy. Dr. Susan Wright believes the bond would enhance Jake's abilities without fundamentally altering his personality. Dr. Wright, a woman in her 50s with gray hair and tired eyes, nodded. The Valerian Queen allowed us to scan her brain patterns during communication. Their telepathy appears to be additive rather than destructive. Sergeant Martinez would gain new abilities while retaining his human consciousness. Appears to be, General Hayes repeated. But we don't know for certain. We're asking this young man to risk his humanity based on appearances. Jake had been listening to the debate, but now he spoke up. General, may I ask you something? Hayes nodded. If you knew that sacrificing one soldier could save both our species, would you make that order? The general studied Jake for a long moment. In awe. Heartbeat. Then let me volunteer for that sacrifice, Jake said simply. Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the command center. A communications officer called out, Sir, we're receiving distress signals from the outer colonies. The Catherians have begun their attack early. The main display filled with images of burning space stations and fleeing civilian ships. The Catherian fleet had split into multiple groups, hitting human and Valerian targets simultaneously across 3 star systems. How many ships are they using? Commander Harper asked. At least 50 in each attack group, the officer replied. And these are just the advance forces. Our scouts report the main fleet is still massing. General Hayes cursed. They're not waiting for their full fleet. They're starting the war now, while we're still trying to decide whether to trust the Valerians. Queen Zareth's voice suddenly filled the command center, coming through the Valerian communication system. General Hayes, Commander Harper, the attack has begun as we predicted. My fleet is moving to assist your colonies, but without full coordination. Our efforts will be scattered and ineffective. Your Majesty, Hayes replied, we're preparing our response now. General, with respect, preparation time is over. Every moment we delay, more innocents die. Sergeant Martinez, have you made your decision? All eyes turned to Jake. He looked at the images of destruction on the display, then at the faces of his fellow humans. Danny gave him an encouraging nod. Commander Harper watched him with trust in her eyes. Even General Hayes seemed to be waiting for his answer. I accept your offer, Your Majesty, Jake said firmly. When do we begin? Immediately, Queen Zareth replied. The ritual must be performed while the battle rages, so that your first act as a bridge-bearer is coordinating our defense of the innocent. General Hayes stepped forward. Sergeant, are you absolutely certain about this? Jake thought about all the conversations he'd had over the past day, about Steve's fears and Danny's faith, about Princess Lyra's drawing of a bridge between worlds, about the burning colonies on the display screen. Yes, sir. This is what I need to do. An hour later, Jake stood in the ceremony chamber aboard the Harmony's edge. The room had been transformed, with symbols glowing on the walls, and the central pool now filled with swirling energy that looked like liquid starlight. Queen Zareth stood at one side of the pool, wearing robes that seemed to be made of pure light. Princess Lyra stood beside her, holding the drawing she had made for Jake. Around the chamber, Valerian nobles chanted in their musical language. On the human side, Commander Harper, Ambassador Brooks, and Danny represented his own people. General Hayes had chosen to watch from the human command ship, but he had given Jake his personal blessing. Before we begin, Queen Zareth said, you must understand that this ritual will be painful. Your body will be changed at the cellular level. Your mind will be expanded to include new forms of consciousness. Are you prepared? Jake nodded. I'm ready. Then step into the pool. Jake walked into the glowing water. It felt warm at first, then increasingly hot. Energy began flowing through his body, and he felt every cell beginning to change. His vision became sharper, his hearing more acute. He could suddenly sense the thoughts and emotions of every Valerian in the room. The pain was incredible, like being struck by lightning and burned by fire at the same time. But through it all, Jake held on to his purpose. He was doing this to save lives, to build bridges, to stop a war. Princess Lyra stepped forward and placed her small hand on Jake's arm. Don't be afraid, she said telepathically, and Jake realized he could hear her thoughts clearly. You're becoming something wonderful. The energy reached a crescendo, and Jake felt his consciousness expand beyond anything he had ever imagined. He could sense Queen Zareth's mind, filled with ancient wisdom and deep compassion. He could feel the crew of the Harmony's edge, each individual consciousness connected to a greater whole. But he could also still feel his human connections. Danny's loyalty and admiration, Commander Harper's respect and hope, even General Hayes's grudging approval coming through their communication link. When the light faded, Jake stood changed. His eyes now glowed with a soft inner light. His movements were more graceful, more precise. He could feel new strength flowing through his enhanced body. How do you feel? Queen Zareth asked. Jake tested his new abilities, accessing both human and Valerian communication networks simultaneously. He could sense the positions of every ship in both fleets, understand their capabilities and limitations. I feel like I can finally see the whole picture, Jake said, and we have work to do. Through his enhanced senses, Jake could perceive the Catherian attack in real time. 3 separate battle groups were overwhelming human and Valerian forces. that couldn't coordinate effectively. General Hayes, Commander Harper, Jake said, his voice now carrying an odd harmonic quality. I can see what the Catherians are doing. They're using our inability to communicate against us, but that's about to change. Jake reached out with his new telepathic abilities, connecting human tactical thinking with Valerian strategic planning. For the first time in the war, both species could truly work as one. A transformation was complete. Jake Martinez was no longer fully human, but he was still himself. And now he had the power to turn the tide of war. Jake's enhanced mind processed information at incredible speed. Through the Valerian network, he could see the positions of every friendly ship across 3 star systems. Through human communications, he understood their tactical capabilities and limitations. For the first time since the war began, he could see the complete picture. General Hayes, Jake said, his voice now carrying strange harmonics that made it sound like multiple people speaking at once. The Catherians are using a 3-pronged attack. They're counting on us fighting separately and getting overwhelmed. What do you see, son? Hayes replied through the communication link. Jake closed his eyes and let his consciousness expand across the battlefield. They have 40 ships attacking the mining colonies at Kepler Station. Another 50 hitting the Valerian medical facility. At Sanctuary Point, the largest group, about 60 ships, is moving toward Earth itself. Queen Zareth stepped beside him in the ceremony chamber. What the Catherians do not know is that we can now coordinate perfectly. Jake, can you link our fleet commanders? Jake reached out with his new telepathic abilities. Suddenly, Captain Maria Santos, commanding the human destroyer Vigilant, could speak directly to Commander Vale of the Valerian cruiser Starweaver. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Moore, at Kepler Station, could coordinate with Valerian ground forces in real time. This is incredible, Captain Santos said through the link. I can understand their tactics completely now. Commander Vale, if you can create those energy barriers you mentioned, we can use our missile platforms behind them. An excellent strategy, Commander Vale replied. Our shields will protect your ships while they reload. Jake felt a surge of satisfaction as he watched human and Valerian forces work together for the first time. But the enemy was still overwhelming them with numbers. We need to move fast, Jake told Queen Zareth. The Catherians will adapt once they realize we're coordinating. Through his enhanced senses, Jake could perceive the battle at Kepler Station. Human Marines were pinned down in the mining tunnels, while Catherian soldiers advanced with their heavy armor. But Jake could also see Valerian healing specialists nearby, unable to help because they couldn't communicate with the humans. Danny, Jake said, speaking directly into his friend's mind. You're at Kepler Station, right? Danny nearly dropped his rifle in surprise. Sarge, is that you? You sound different. It's still me, just enhanced. Listen carefully. There are Valerian medics, 50 meters to your east. They have healing technology that can save the wounded Marines in your squad. But they need someone to escort them through the combat zone. On it, Danny replied. Within minutes, Jake watched through the Valerian network as Danny led a team of alien healers to the wounded humans. Soldiers who would have died were back, on their feet within hours. The coordination was working, but Jake realized they needed a bigger advantage. The Catherian fleet heading toward Earth was massive, and even with perfect coordination, the combined human Valerian forces might not be enough to stop it. Your Majesty, Jake said to Queen Zareth, do the Valerians have any weapons or tactics we haven't used yet? The Queen smiled. We have something called the Harmony Strike. It requires perfect synchronization between multiple ships, which is why we've never been able to use it with allies before. But now, with you coordinating ... double quotes, Jake felt excitement building. What does it do? Watch, Queen Zareth said. Through his enhanced perception, Jake saw 6 Valerian ships moving into formation around 3 human destroyers. The Valerian vessels began to glow, channeling energy to the human ships. Suddenly, the human destroyers fired weapons that were 10 times more powerful than their normal capabilities. The combined blast tore through the Cytherian formation at Sanctuary Point, destroying 12 enemy ships in seconds. "Amazing," General Hayes said over the communication. "Link, how many times can you do that?" "As many times as needed," Queen Zareth replied. "But it requires Jake to coordinate the timing perfectly. Even a second of miscommunication would cause the energy to overload our ships." Jake nodded, understanding the responsibility. "I can handle it, but we need to be smart about targeting. The Cytherians will start avoiding our formations once they see what we can do." Over the next several hours, Jake coordinated the most complex military operation in human history. He linked the minds of dozens of ship captains, hundreds of ground commanders, and thousands of individual soldiers. Human creativity and adaptability combined with Valerian technology and wisdom got at Kepler Station. Human engineers worked with Valerian technicians to turn the mining equipment into massive weapons. The mining lasers, enhanced with Valerian power cores, could punch through Cytherian ship armor like paper dot at Sanctuary Point. Valerian healers kept human pilots fighting long past the point where exhaustion should have grounded them. Meanwhile, human tactical doctrine helped the peaceful Valerians develop more effective combat strategies. But the largest battle was yet to come. The main Cytherian fleet, 60 ships strong, was approaching Earth's solar system. Jake could sense their confidence through intercepted communications. They expected to find divided, weakened defenders. Instead, they found something unprecedented. "All ships, this is Bridge Bearer Jake Martinez," Jake announced across both human and Valerian networks. "Today we fight not as separate species, but as one people defending our homes. Let's show the Cytherians what unity looks like." The combined fleet met the Cytherians at the edge of the solar system. 40 human ships working in perfect coordination with 30 Valerian vessels. Jake's enhanced mind processed thousands of tactical decisions per second, adjusting formations, coordinating attacks, and predicting enemy movements. The battle was unlike anything ever seen before. Human ships used Valerian energy shields to survive attacks that should have destroyed them. Valerian vessels used human hit-and-run tactics to confuse and divide the enemy fleet. The Harmony Strike became a devastating weapon, eliminating entire Cytherian squadrons. But Jake's greatest advantage was his ability to think like both species simultaneously. When the Cytherians adapted to Valerian energy weapons, Jake coordinated human kinetic attacks. When they countered human mobility, Jake used Valerian defensive formations. "They're falling back," Captain Santis reported. "The Cytherian fleet is retreating toward the outer system." "No," Jake said, his enhanced senses picking up something others missed. "They're regrouping for a final assault. They're going to throw everything at Earth in one massive attack." Through the Valerian network, Jake felt Queen Zareth's concern. "Can our combined forces stop them?" Jake calculated quickly. The Cytherians still had 40 ships left, and they were forming into a tight formation that would be hard to break. It would take everything they had. "Danny, are you ready for the biggest fight of our lives?" Jake asked his old friend. "Always ready to follow you, Sarge," Danny replied. "Even if you are part alien now." Jake laughed, and the sound carried across both communication networks. Human soldiers and Valerian crew members heard it and felt their spirits lift. Their bridge bearer was still human where it mattered most. The final battle lasted 6 hours. Jake coordinated attacks from every angle, using human unpredictability and Valerian precision in combinations the Cytherians couldn't counter. When the enemy tried to ram Earth's orbital defenses, Jake linked every ship in the fleet to create a massive energy barrier that stopped them cold dot in the end. The Catherian fleet was completely destroyed. Not a single enemy ship escaped to report back to their empire. The threat to both human and Valerian space was ended. As the last enemy. Ship exploded. Jake felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. Using his enhanced abilities for so long had drained him more than any physical battle ever had. "Jake," Queen Zareth said gently, "you did it. You saved both our peoples." "We all did it," Jake replied. "Humans and Valerians together. Princes." Lyra's voice came through the telepathic link. "Jake, you really did become a bridge between the stars, just like in my drawing." 5 years later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the joint human-Valerian space station Unity 1. Through the viewports, he could see ships from both species working together to build new colonies and research facilities. Children of both species played together in the station's gardens, speaking each other's languages fluently. Danny, now a major in the integrated forces, joined him at the viewport. "Any regrets, Jake?" Jake touched the crystal pendant Queen Zareth had given him, which still glowed softly on his chest. Through his enhanced senses, he could feel the contentment and hope of thousands of beings from both species. "No regrets," Jake said. "This is exactly where I'm supposed to be." He had given up his purely human life to become something new. But in return, he had helped create a future where two species could thrive together among the stars. Some sacrifices, Jake had learned, were really gifts in disguise. The war was over. The bridge between worlds was built. And Jake Martinez, the first bridge bearer, watched over it all with eyes that glowed like stars.